Welcome to the Redhead Reveal podcast, where we reveal what it means to truly connect. I'm Jenn Pinkerton, your Redhead host. I'm a psychotherapist, high-performance coach, sexologist, writer, and speaker. As a connection expert, I help people transform by exploring the root causes and beliefs and behaviors that hold them back. Let's talk about living a life where you thrive. All right, welcome to the Redhead Reveal podcast today. I'm excited because I have got Leola Watkins with me, who is the Pleasure Priestess, and I've been following her for a while. So I'm excited to actually let all of you see her and meet her and hear about this amazing idea of sacred sex in the book that she wrote that's available on Amazon. We're going to link that in the show notes for you. But it's all about something that we at the podcast here really push, which is the idea of authenticity and embodiment and living this life in a way that feels so very real and so very full. And part of that fulfillment is having a sexual life where you're thriving. And I think that's exactly where you are. So welcome.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor, and thank you in advance to the listeners for opening yourself up to this sacred and sexy conversation. I'm really excited to bring it to you.
So I want to kind of start off with just giving people an idea about how did you become the Pleasure Priestess? How did you get involved in this work?
Yeah, I think quite similar to a lot of people that work in different healing modalities and self-growth industries. For me, I grew up in the Midwest in an environment that was pretty limiting in terms of what I believed possible for me, what I believed possible for my life. My perspective of intimacy and my body were deeply damaged. I had what I would call an inherently traumatizing sex education. It's my belief that most of us in the Western world have an inherently traumatizing sexual education just because of how religion and school sex ed and our parents and our early sexual experiences shape our sexual education. So you don't need to have an event such as sexual assault to point at and say, there's my sexual trauma. It's just even the way that we're learning about sex organically in our culture is inherently traumatizing, in my opinion. Even if you just think about like when you're learning to discover pleasure, most of us aren't taught about pleasure or self-pleasure. And so we're learning about our pleasure in the dark, behind closed doors, trying to get it over as fast as possible, trying not to make any noise, and then trying to hide the evidence in it. So a lot of us don't realize that we might be carrying some of that pattern, some of that conditioning of this is bad and wrong, or I need to like tame myself down, or like let me rush through pleasure rather than reveling in it and actually maximizing the benefits of these types of practices. So that was my story. And on top of that, I did have a few very clear instances that I could point at and say, well, that was sexual assault. So by the time I was in my early 20s, I was just carrying a lot. And I found meditation and I found yoga, and those were really great practices to kind of get me started. But I found that they weren't really fully holistic, in that a lot of modalities that you look at for self-development don't address sexuality. And this energy, sexuality, is the energy that brought us all into this world. Like every person on earth is here because two people had sex. And so if we're not addressing our sexuality as a part of our overall health, wellness, and self-development, then we're missing a lot. Like this energy is literally the fabric of our existence. It's created each of us. It created every plant, every animal, every living thing on earth, and even like actual physical things like, you know, my book or this teacup or my phone. Like these were all created by someone or something that was created by sex. So we can really see that this is the fabric of our reality. And that's what I love about Tantra, and why Tantra really appealed to me, because it was bringing this sacredness and this spirituality back into my body, into my intimacy, into a place where not only am I having the most deeply fulfilling intimacy and relationship with myself, but I'm also turned on by life itself and finding aliveness, joy, and pleasure in places that you would never think to look, or that I was told not to look. So
you know, I love all that because I do think we are these adaptations of our experiences. good, bad, or otherwise. And I think that purity culture does play a huge part. I think that most people have sexual experiences rooted in shame, even if they don't readily understand that. And to me, it's this idea that even if someone did not experience assault or sexual trauma, like you're saying, if even it was something as simple as I had an amazing child and amazing parents, but I was told I shouldn't be having sex. That one small message is something that we carry into adulthood. We carry into what our sexual life it looks like. And I think that it's so important to get back to an idea that having sex in this way where you feel alive is what it's all about. And as a sex therapist, this is something I work so often with people on. But I think that many people still have this idea of maybe, okay, I don't think I'm carrying the shame, but I just don't really enjoy it, or I don't really have a sex drive, or I don't really see what the big deal is about it. And that exact nuance right there is, I think, when I was reading your book, I got so much out of that I thought a lot of clients of mine, a lot of people that I know struggle with that concept could take away from this, because unlike a lot of books out there about sexual experiences and about being more embodied and sensual, don't have the sense of aliveness that your book does and what you actually practice. And I really love that, because it's this kind of idea of joy and magic. And I think that is something that if people want to grasp onto that, the whole idea of intimacy shifts.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And thank you for the kind words about the book. I've read a lot of books about tantra and sacred sexuality and Taoist practices, and they can seem a bit esoteric or a bit out of touch to
or woo-woo. People say it's too woo-woo. Yeah.
Too woo-woo. So I wanted to make it really approachable and fun and playful. And yeah, I think that there are definitely a lot of people too that feel this energy of, I just am not interested in sex. I don't have a desire. And so I do have a lot of people that come to me and they think that they might have low libido, and that could be a thing. Like, they could have hormonal imbalances. There could be mental health things that are impacting our libido. There could be medications, many other factors, stress, etc. But that being said, there's also this question of, well, are you having crave-worthy sex? Because many people come to me saying they don't have any desire for sex with their partners, or if they're single, to pursue a sexual relationship. Some have never enjoyed or desired sex. Some actively avoid sex because they associate it with pain in their bodies.
Yes.
And others may have enjoyed sex in the past, but that desire has dried up. But I have found that most people find that it's not actually legitimately low libido. It's that they don't know what's on the menu. Like, sexual intimacy can be this buffet, and crave-worthy sex is really subjective. And a lot of us don't know what is crave-worthy for us, because we've been given what I call, society soup sex, which is the type of sex that's most often portrayed and spoken of and accepted by society. And it's often spontaneous and hyper-focused on having an orgasm. It's the sex that you see in porn. It's the sex that you see on TV shows.
Right.
But you might want something that's more energetic, more kinky, more sensual. Like, what is your crave-worthy sex? So that's a whole other.
I like that, though. I like that. I think that you have also this positive energy, which I imagine with your clients that you work with and at your workshops and things you do, that is appealing to people who, again, are walking into this with a sense of either embarrassment or shame or just uncertainty or awkwardness. And the positive energy, I think, is something I want to focus on, because I think that's one of the basic foundations of how can we shift. How can we grow into being a more embodied sexual being? By having this positive idea about sex in general, about understanding it can be magical and fun. And the pleasure is something that is fun. And we don't have to have this idea of the finish line or the goalpost. It's just simply, let's enjoy it. Let's have enjoyment and getting back to what enjoyment means. So I really like that aspect of it. And to me, I dangle that carrot a little bit to people who challenge and say, well, why would I need to do anything like this? Why would I need to explore any of this, have that adventurous exploration? And that's my question. Do you feel like sex is this positive, magical, embodied experience? And if you don't, then here's an opportunity. And I look at it as just a true opportunity. How can we evolve? Every living thing either has to grow or die. So let's grow. Let's grow into this. And that's kind of what I like. So I want to talk about one of the notes I made here was that even in your 20s, I think you talked about tantra was kind of like you're beginning into this. So what would you say to somebody who really has never had any exposure to anything? Is that the starting point? What do you think is the starting point for someone who really feels a little stuck in their sex life?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Tantra just really landed again, particularly because it felt really holistic. It wasn't just about sexuality. It wasn't just about getting off or getting pleasure. It felt really deeply rooted in these ancient traditions and as well as healing on this multifaceted level. So for me, I definitely found the interest in Tantra for the cool sex tricks. Like that was my exciting entry point. And I think that it is for a lot of people. But it's not very far down the line that I found myself healing my inner child and having not just deeply fulfilling relationships with others, but also myself with my friends. I healed my relationship to abundance. I stepped into purpose. And so my whole life changed because Tantra, it can be like a very sexualized like practice and modality, especially in the Western world. But there's so many different lineages and practices and modalities of Tantra. There's classical Tantra, Neo Tantra, Egyptian Tantra, Taoist Tantra. Like there's so many. And so it can be a little bit misconstrued. But the way that I like to think about Tantra is how can you be turned on by life, bringing this aliveness that so many of us only feel when we're in a sexual situation into our day to day and begin to look at the world with this lens of, can I see God in everything? Can I see the sacred in everything? Tantra, the word itself, is actually two concepts put together. So Tantra is a Sanskrit word. Sanskrit is an ancient language from East Asia in which many spiritual and religious texts were written. And tan means to expand and tra means to liberate. So by that definition, Tantra is all about expansion and liberation. And what I love about that etymological definition is that it's so broad. Yeah. What is expansive and liberating to me is going to be very different than it is to you and to each individual listening. So to me, Tantra is this place where we step in. There's no right, wrong, good or bad. It's all about calibrating to your higher self. It's about having this level of self-awareness to say, is what I am doing in this season of life helping me grow? As you had said, is it getting me closer to this level of growth and freedom that I deeply desire? And again, that looks different from person to person. So that's why it's really worked for me, is this like allowance, this permission, this more feminine perspective, rather than having this very didactic, regimented practice. There's a lot more fluidity and space to calibrate again.
So what would be one small step on someone's personal journey to say, I recognize I'm at a deficit here? What would be their one small step that you think would be a profound step in the right direction to this entire different world?
Yeah. So what I'll say is everyone's different. So different tools are going to work for different people. So part of me hesitates to say, this is the tool.
Sure.
And I'll give you a tool and I'll say one more thing about it.
Okay.
Inside my book, Sacred Sex Ed, which is not like, here's a diagram of a pussy and a cock, and here are different sexual positions. No, it's about having deeply fulfilling intimacy. It's the sex education that you probably didn't have, that we all desperately need, that's empowering, honest, and pleasure-based. And so at the end of each chapter in the book, there are different exercises. So I think that if you could go through the book and actually do the exercises, that would be an amazing, amazing first start.
Okay.
Second thing that I'll say is begin just treating each moment like a meditation of pleasure and turned on energy. So what I like to do is when I wake up, think, how can I make this day even more pleasurable? Or in any given moment, how can I make this moment even more pleasurable? And this can be as simple as, okay, I'm doing the dishes. How can I make this moment even more pleasurable? Something mundane, something stupid. No one likes doing the dishes. But what if while you're doing the dishes, you take the time to actually enjoy the warm water running over your skin? Or maybe afterwards you say, well, I'm going to give myself a little lotion massage since I dried out my hands a little bit. Or what if I just thought about the fact that my fridge is full of food and I'm doing the dishes because I'm so well nourished. And who did I get to share my meal with? And so it's this moment of beginning to retrain your brain to see the pleasure and the aliveness that's all around you in any given moment. So that's kind of my daily practice is how can I make this moment even more pleasurable?
And I also hear gratitude in there. I hear this piece of gratitude. And I think that, having an idea of gratitude in our life can decrease our anxiety in general about life. So I like seeing gratitude tied in with pleasure as well. I think that's a great component.
Yeah, pleasure and gratitude are both incredible, like health aids, right? When we're in gratitude, when we're in pleasure, when we're in orgasmic bliss, our body is releasing all types of hormones and chemicals that boost our immune system, that regulate our nervous system, that support our mental health. So it's actually like, in my opinion, like you've got to do it. Like you've got to do it for yourself. You know what I mean?
But that idea right there, you've got to do it. To some people might be like, why? I've never felt that was great. Why would I want to do it? I've never had that kind of experience. It's been either transactional or it's been performative or, it's been an obligatory. And I think that so many people don't recognize there is so much more. And I think when people are in a relationship with a partner, sometimes there's this idea, if I'm trying to go for more, there's something wrong with my partner. And that idea is a challenging barrier, I think, sometimes to growth sexually, is an idea that I can want more, I can be curious about more and embrace curiosity without having to be my partners at a deficit. How about we instead are both growing together? We both want to be excited about, what could we do? What could we shift? How could our entire perspective about sexuality and intimacy change together? What do you say to people who come to you that are in partnerships where that becomes a challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. I work with a lot of couples that are kind of digging their heels in the sand on two opposite sides. And it can be really challenging because the invitation is, well, let's build a bridge to find a way for you to meet in the middle. Like you're desiring this type of intimacy, you're not desiring intimacy or desiring an entirely different type of intimacy. And how can we build the bridge to get to this place where you're able to find this deeply fulfilling intimacy? And that's the thing that both people generally have a vision of what they think is like good or the right type of sex. And really what sex is about is intimacy. It's about connection. It's about merging with another person. And so a lot of the work that I do is around building that bridge. So I would say like the typical client avatars that I would work with, or an example of clients that I've worked with, in one couple, there was a man that was really desiring just to have more sex in general, but was also wanting to explore and try new things and just had this vision for a more abundant sexual marriage. And the woman had a lot of sexual trauma, grew up in a very religious, cult-like background where intimacy and sexuality were so bad and wrong. And so what I did with that couple was move into this space of starting really slowly, taking the goals off the table, taking away it needs to look a certain way, and instead giving them some very basic tools that allowed them to connect with each other, to communicate, to slow down, to begin getting curious without this pressure, without this end goal. And that naturally allowed the pleasure and the curiosity and the arrows to flow. I like to say like pleasure and sexuality is like water. So if you imagine water coming out of a faucet, if you're trying to grab onto the water or the pleasure or the orgasm, it evades you, right? Like that's not how water works.
I love this beautiful image. I've never thought about this. This is great.
Yeah. And not only like while you're grabbing the water, is it just not going to work and it's going to be frustrating, but you're also missing the sensation. You're missing the water flowing over your skin. So if you think about a lot of like, I don't know about you, but I see this as a common experience for people that they're trying to have that orgasm so hard and
Yes.
so bad and like trying to grab. And like the more we try to make it happen, the more it eludes us. And the
Yes.
same can happen just in general with intimacy and sexuality in relationship if we keep trying to make it look a certain way. So the tools that I would, suggest for each couple depends on what they're particularly experiencing. But generally, a lot of it is slowing down. A lot of it is some tools that are more approachable to feminine bodies and the pace of feminine bodies. Yeah, good stuff.
I like all that. I like all that. So, another question. What about this idea about finding God in your body, which you said? And that's mentioned, and it's in your book. You talk about finding God in your body. To some people, that might be a really scary idea. I want you to kind of explain that a little bit to us.
Yeah, it's interesting. So again, in many religions, practices, cultures, we see this theme of devotion, right? And very often that devotion is geared outwardly. It's like, let me find something or someone or some other energy that I'm going to be devoted to. Whereas Tantra almost like inverts it, where it's like, okay, can I love myself and be devoted to myself enough and be in this moment of knowing that like I am a piece of source and a piece of source is in my body and be in devotion to myself. And devotion to self doesn't just look like bubble baths and like being treated like a queen. No, devotion to self is also listening to your intuition, setting boundaries when it's really hard, having the hard conversations and coming out the other side. It's listening to your intuition when your intuition is saying something that you're like, no, I don't want to do that. Right. So like that's devotion to self. So starting with devotion to self, then there's this opportunity of, okay, like if I can see God in myself, then can I see God in another? And that's that practice of like sacred union, divine partnership. And it's not just with a significant other, but it starts with devotion to self, then devotion to another. And then there's devotion to the whole world. Like, can I let my beingness, my expression of my unique frequency of divinity, of godliness, inspire and awaken others? Can I use my essence to seduce the world into a greater good just by being my authentic self? And a lot of this work is about just stepping into your authentic self because your soul came here for a unique reason, a unique mission. And the more that you evade your authentic self, the more that you're evading that mission. And it doesn't need to look like I'm going to go out and champion this cause. It's just, again, being your authentic self. Like you have
Right.
no idea how many like people you are influencing just by being a positive expression of authenticity and vulnerability and divine love. And so it's like dominoes, right? Like we all know the impact of going into like the post office and the difference between having a, very supportive, helpful employee versus having someone that obviously doesn't want to be there and is unhappy with their life. And we can see like how our energy shifts when we walk out the door based on, how that person is being. And the same is true for every single person that you come in contact with as well.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's wonderful. What do you think about people that when they come to you, they have all these myths, sexual myths and misconceptions about sex? How do you kind of dismantle either that myth or that trope or this idea? Because I think that those preconceived notions are so damaging. And I'm not just talking about ones that are rooted in shame. I'm just talking about maybe men don't do that, or that's not something that I should be doing. A lot of shoulds. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say that a lot of that work is shadow work, right? So when we're talking about shadow work was coined by Carl Jung, who is this incredible psychiatrist from Sweden, I believe, Switzerland, Sweden. Anyways, he is great. So what is shadow? Shadow is basically, these parts of ourselves that we see as undesirable and may not be fully integrating, accepting, or consciously working to integrate. And these could just be, limiting beliefs, right? And oftentimes this might show up as feeling let down by your sex life, or feeling like your sex life controls you, or even just feeling like there's gotta be something more. And the whole first 5 chapters of the book, Sacred Sex Ed, are about integrating the shadows. We also do a lot of this work in community at the Tantra Love Retreat. And a lot of this work you can do yourself, but it does take being really self-aware, really conscious, and asking yourself, when a belief like that comes up, is it actually true? And you might have some evidence that it's true, but is it holistically true? So observing your emotional reactions without judgment, being curious about things that trigger you, things that excite you, things that cause a deep emotional response.
Mhm.
It might be something like, your partner wants to try something new and you're like, ick, like I don't want to, like, no, don't go near my butt, whatever it is.
Right. You're yucking the yum here. Mhm.
Yeah. And so it's getting curious about, like, okay, well, where did that judgment come from originally? Like, is that truly mine? And it's okay that if it is, but usually it's not. And then you get to decide, well, do I want to keep it or do I want to throw it away? So
Mhm.
it's, being aware of that internal dialogue, being aware of your emotional triggers. Um, and I think that there's also a quality of embracing sex positivity, like encouraging yourself to decide what that means to you, but also respecting others for their own expression of sex positivity.
Yes, I do love that answer. And I think that the shadow work, it really aligns from like a psychotherapy standpoint too. I do a lot of parts work, and we all have these parts of us that are either maybe protecting us and they're in the way. They're in the way of that. And so I think that it is integral to really do some work about your inner child, about what holds you back, about the wounds, because those wounds kind of, to me, are the key to enlightenment. It's the key to figuring out, why am I not thriving? Why don't I feel this love for my life? You know?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
love that you focus on that.
Thank you. And I'll share one particular exercise from the book that a lot of people talk about and that has been really supportive, which is a sexual history timeline. So you create a timeline of all of your impactful sexual experiences, but not just like, the first time you had sex, the best sex, but also like, what was your sex education like? When was the first time that you learned about what genitals even are, and that boys and girls are different? And you can often find in each one of those little moments on your sexual history timeline that there's a story or a belief that you're carrying that may be great and expansive, but oftentimes will also carry different preconceived notions or limiting beliefs. And again, that exercise is in the book, but that's the essence of it.
Yeah, I think that's great. You also talk about liberating, having this moment of liberation where you really explore what is your capacity for pleasure. And I think a lot of people maybe don't think they even have a capacity for pleasure beyond, I'm just going to have an orgasm. That's it. I'm just going to come and that's all I'm looking for. Can you expound a little bit on that and explain kind of how that capacity is so very different and what opportunities there are for people in that?
Yeah, I like to call this expanding your orgasmic potential.
Okay.
So, yeah, there are so many different types of orgasms that you may or may not know of. I think for women, most people just think of the clitoral orgasm, which many can reach just from external stimulation. Love a good clitoral orgasm. For men, in a similar way, there's such things as like a peak orgasm where, you're trying to come quicker than, like as quick as possible. And then there's this big release. And then there's this like drop in energy and tiredness. And so those are both sort of peak orgasms, which are great. There's like, to me, there's no bad or wrong pleasure. And that's like the one thing we've been given, but there's this whole other range of experience for orgasmic potential. You can have G-spot orgasms. You can have cervical orgasms. You can have breast orgasms. You can have full body orgasms. You can have energetic orgasms. You can have cosmic orgasms. You can have heartgasms. You can have an angergasm. Like, there's just so much available. And what I'll say is, again, going back to that, analogy that so many of us learn about sexuality in the dark, behind closed doors, trying to get it over with as soon as possible. And a lot of these different types of orgasms are unlocked, if you will, when you allow yourself to slow down and to learn how this life force energy moves in your body, how you can maximize it, how you can channel it into your heart so you can have something like a heartgasm, so that you can, begin to explore and pleasure map the inside of your pussy and find different areas that you never would have thought bring you pleasure, or explore your back door, or incorporate different types of erogenous zones into the play to bring the orgasm more online, more full bodied. A lot of expanding orgasmic potential, and not all of it, but one practice that's really supportive for people is edging. Is a sort of edging practice where you allow yourself to get close to orgasm, but you take more deep breaths and slow things down, and then you're able to have more waves that then build up to a bigger, potentially full body cosmic heartgasm, etc.
And all that has to do with cultivating that intention. The idea of, we want to slow sex down. We want to focus on different body parts. This is not about a finish line. It's not about, maybe what we've always thought sex was. And I find in my work too, and I'm wondering if you do, that a lot of times, there's two different presenting concerns here, where maybe a lot of women have had too much shame to feel embodied, or have not been comfortable to explore their sexuality due to maybe feeling they would be shamed for doing so. And then a lot of times men are only looking for the finish line. They don't know that they can embody more. And sometimes I think there's a stigma to men about a sense of, masculinity. Can we slow down? Can we be that guy that can be gentle, that can be interested, that can be curious? And I think that becomes a barrier often. So do you work with a lot of men, especially that face that? Because I see men in my practice often for that one reason.
Yeah, I do. It's not such a big part of my practice anymore. Where I'm putting a lot of my energy in this season of life is actually training women to do what I do, training women to fully reclaim their sensuality and step into orgasmic leadership, because I spent years and years working as a solo tantrika with couples and a lot of single men and some single women. And I realized that this work was really impactful and powerful, but it's my belief that women are the leaders in love in this revolution, and I can do so much more in this world by actually empowering more women with these tools rather than keeping them to myself and working one-on-one with
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. So for women that are interested in stepping into that path, the tantrika path, I have a year-long program called Pleasure Priestess. But for men, working with a tantric body worker can be really, really powerful, really impactful, because for so many men, they're in their heads. They're also facilitating the sexual experience. Like generally it's the masculine individual that's keeping things going and is more penetrative energetically and less receptive to energy flowing back. And that's not a bad thing. Like we love that. But when you go in and get a tantric bodywork session from a woman, generally, or at least me, you're going to be completely receptive. And what that does is, if you're a man that's allowed to be completely receptive, then you're able to begin to witness and see the possibility of how this energy can move in your body. And then you can become the master of it. So many men are having sex like they're masturbating with someone's body. Mm-hmm. And this is an invitation to slow down and see, another analogy, a lot of men, like their sexual energy is really, concentrated in their root chakra, in their cock. And what we want to do for men is slow things down so that they can move that energy into their hearts, move the energy up. So that's something that we would do in a tantric bodywork session if there was the receptivity for that. And once you feel that for yourself, having received it, it becomes a lot easier to do that in your own self-pleasure practice with women, etc. What I will say though is, when you're looking for a tantric bodywork practitioner, not all are treated equally. Like a lot of it's like glorified hand jobs. So just be mindful of that. But the best website to find a tantric body worker is sacredarrows.com, sacred and then eros.com.
So I want everybody to read your book because I loved it. And I want everybody to embrace this idea of intention and embodiment and recognizing that sex is about more, and we can do more and feel more and be more present. All that being said, I want everybody to know all about the programs you have. We know about this year-long Pleasure Priestess, which sounds amazing. What about the other workshops or events or things? I want everybody to be able to hear the different opportunities they have through you. So what are some other things you want to tell us about, if anything?
Yeah, I'll totally share. Again, you can find the book on Amazon. Just search Sacred Sex Ed. I do 3 to 4 day workshops here in Austin, Texas. It's a retreat, the Tantra Love Retreat, and that's open to singles and couples. So single men, single women, and couples. We keep the gender balanced. Also with the Pleasure Priestess, there's an included 2 day immersion, but that's a whole year to do life and love together. And then I do other random events here and there. I have an event in LA coming up, one in New York City, and then I do other things in other parts of the country and here in Austin.
But we're going to link your Instagram so everybody can see all the different things you're doing. I think it's such a pleasure to get to know you. And I hope everybody can open their eyes a little bit, open their minds, and be a little more curious to what sex could look like, to what pleasure could look like, and redefine that. That being said, we always have a guest question that somebody has asked before. And I thought it was so interesting, the question, because they're never related to the future guests. They're not about, they don't know who's coming on next. But it was so interesting to me and so apropos that the question the last guest left for you was, what would your 90-year-old self think of you today? And I thought, oh, I can't wait to see what Leola's going to say to this. So what would be your answer to that?
I love it. Another question that's similar but different is like, what would your 16-year-old self think about you today?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a much easier one to answer because I've been a 16-year-old girl. I haven't been a 90-year-old yet, so I really don't know. But I feel like my 90-year-old self is going to be like, yep, she set it up. She did it.
She did it. She rocked it.
Whole life, like, good on her. Like, and I like to say that Tantra is really like a youth elixir. I see so many people that really are following the tantric path and look like 10, 15 years younger than they are. So I imagine myself at 90 looking like 75. And with all that Tantra. So yeah, I think that there'll be some compassion and grace but a lot of appreciation.
I think that's beautiful. What question would you like to leave a future guest?
I would like to ask, what do you not want people to know about you?
Okay, that's a good one too. All right, so you'll have to stay tuned to hear that answer with the next person that comes on and joins us on Redhead Reveal. It's been so amazing to talk to you, and let's stay in touch. I can't wait to see what's coming next. And everybody, buy this book.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.